The stopwatch clicked. 4 minutes, 23 seconds. Coach Helena Martinez stared at the display, her jaw clenched tight as she watched the gangly teenager emerge from the pool, gasping and struggling to pull herself up the ladder. Around them, the pristine natatorium at Riverside Aquatic Academy echoed with the sounds of other swimmers cutting through the water with precision and grace. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Riley Chen, Martinez called out, her voice carrying across the humid air. That's the worst 400-meter freestyle I've seen in 23 years of coaching. You'll never make it here. The words hung in the chlorine-scented air like a death sentence. Riley Chen had never planned to become a swimmer. Growing up in the industrial town of Millbrook, Ohio, her world revolved around her family's struggling electronics repair shop and helping her younger brother with his homework. Swimming was something rich kids did at country clubs, not something for a 17-year-old whose idea of athletic achievement was running 2 miles without stopping to catch her breath. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. The accident happened on a Tuesday in March. Riley was driving her brother Danny to school when a delivery truck ran a red light, slamming into the passenger side of their beat-up Honda Civic. Danny survived with minor injuries, but the trauma left him with severe anxiety around cars and crowds. Their family doctor, Dr. Patricia Thornton, suggested aquatic therapy as a way to help Danny regain his confidence and strength. The only problem was that neither Riley nor Danny knew how to swim properly. That's how Riley found herself standing at the edge of the community pool at 6 a.m. 3 times a week, learning basic strokes from a part-time instructor named Marcus Webb. Marcus was a former college swimmer whose dreams of Olympic glory had been cut short by a shoulder injury, and he now made ends meet teaching beginners and coaching a small age group team. Riley was terrible at first, absolutely terrible. She flailed through the water like someone fighting for their life, which in many ways she was. Her breathing was erratic, her strokes were uncoordinated, and she had a peculiar habit of swimming with her head completely out of the water, as if the pool might suddenly drain and leave her stranded. But something strange happened during those early morning sessions. While Danny gradually improved and regained his confidence, Riley discovered something she had never experienced before: the meditative quality of moving through water. When she finally learned to put her face down and breathe rhythmically, the underwater world became her sanctuary. The muffled silence, the feeling of weightlessness, the way her problems seemed to dissolve in the chlorinated embrace of the pool. Marcus noticed her dedication before he noticed her potential. Riley showed up early, stayed late, and asked endless questions about technique and training. She had the kind of hunger that couldn't be taught, the relentless curiosity that separated those who dabbled from those who dove deep. "You know," Marcus said one morning after Riley had completed her first continuous 500-meter freestyle, "there's this academy about an hour north of here, Riverside Aquatic Academy. They train some of the best age group swimmers in the state." Riley wrung out her hair and looked skeptical. "I just learned how to do flip turns last week, Marcus. I don't think I'm academy material." "Maybe not yet," Marcus said, studying her stroke mechanics with the eye of someone who understood the difference between raw talent and refined technique. "But you've got something most people don't. You've got the water sense." Water sense. It was a term Marcus used to describe swimmers who moved through water as if they belonged there, who understood intuitively how to work with the water rather than against it. Riley had it, though she didn't know it yet. Her stroke was rough and her times were mediocre, but she moved through the water with an efficiency that couldn't be taught. Marcus began training Riley more seriously, adjusting her technique and introducing her to more challenging sets. He taught her about stroke mechanics, about the importance of core rotation, about how to use her entire body as a propulsion system rather than just her arms and legs. Riley absorbed every piece of information like a sponge, practicing in the community pool during open swim times, studying swimming videos on her phone, and even trying to improve her streamline position while lying on her bedroom floor. Her times began to drop, not dramatically at first, but consistently.
The 500 freestyle that had taken her nearly 8 minutes when she started was now down to 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Her 100 freestyle dropped from over 2 minutes to 1 minute and 37 seconds. Marcus started timing her more seriously, using a stopwatch instead of the large pace clock on the pool deck. He introduced her to interval training, teaching her to hold specific speeds for multiple repeats. Riley's competitive nature, which had been dormant through years of focusing on family responsibilities and academic achievement, began to emerge. That's when Marcus made the suggestion that would change everything. "There's a time trial at Riverside next month," he said one August morning. "Coach Martinez runs them for swimmers who want to try out for the Academy's development program. It's mostly for kids who've been swimming competitively for years, but I think you should go." Riley nearly choked on the water she had accidentally swallowed. "Marcus, those kids have been swimming since they were 5 years old. I've been swimming for 5 months. "Exactly," Marcus said with a grin, "which means you've got nowhere to go but up." The drive to Riverside Aquatic Academy was the longest hour of Riley's life. She sat in the passenger seat of Marcus's truck, her stomach churning with a mixture of nerves and excitement as they wound through the hills of northern Ohio. The Academy's facility was unlike anything she had ever seen. The building was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased 2 pristine pools. A 50-meter competition pool with lane lines that looked like they had never been touched, and a separate warm-up pool that was larger than the community pool where Riley had learned to swim. The parking lot was filled with luxury SUVs and sedans, many with swim team stickers from elite clubs across the Midwest. Riley looked down at her discount store swimsuit and generic goggles, feeling suddenly and acutely aware of how much she didn't belong. Inside, the natatorium was even more impressive. The ceiling soared 40 feet above the pool deck, and the air circulation system kept the space from having the oppressive humidity that Riley associated with swimming facilities. The pool deck gleamed under high-intensity lighting designed to minimize shadows and glare.
Coach Helena Martinez was exactly what Riley had expected from Marcus's descriptions. Tall, imposing, with silver-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of a swimmer's technique within seconds. She had been coaching at Riverside for over 2 decades, producing dozens of state champions, several national-level swimmers, and 3 Olympic trial qualifiers. Martinez gathered the time trial participants on the pool deck. There were maybe 20 swimmers, most of them looking like they had stepped out of a swimming magazine. The girls had perfectly applied waterproof makeup and team suits that probably cost more than Riley's family spent on groceries in a month. The boys had the broad shoulders and narrow waists that came from years of dedicated training. Riley felt like an imposter. Martinez explained the format. Each swimmer would complete a 400-meter freestyle time trial followed by a 100-meter race in their best stroke. Times would be evaluated against national age group standards, and a select few would be invited to join the Academy's development program. Riley was in the 3rd heat of the 400 freestyle, seeded based on the time Marcus had submitted from her best practice swim. As she walked to the starting blocks, she caught snippets of conversation from other swimmers and their parents. "Sarah's been training with her private coach 6 times a week. We're hoping to drop another 2 seconds before junior nationals. The new team suits are supposed to be worth at least half a second." Riley touched the starting block and looked down the lane. The water was so clear she could see every detail of the pool bottom and could count the tiles that marked the 25-meter intervals. She adjusted her goggles, trying to ignore the way her hands were shaking. "Swimmers, take your mark." The starting signal pierced the air, and Riley dove in with the other 7 swimmers in her heat. For the first 100 meters, she held her own, staying within a body length of the leaders. But as the race progressed, the difference in training and experience began to show. The other swimmers maintained their pace with mechanical precision, their stroke rates never varying, their breathing patterns as regular as clockwork. Riley, meanwhile, was fighting the water, fighting her breathing, fighting the voice in her head that whispered she didn't belong there. By the 200-meter mark, she was trailing the field. By 300 meters, she was alone in last place, her stroke beginning to fall apart as fatigue set in. She touched the wall and immediately looked up at the scoreboard, searching for her time among the heat results.
Lane 4, Chen Riley, 4:23.07. It was her personal best time by nearly 15 seconds, but in the context of this time trial, it might as well have been an hour. The winner of her heat had touched in 3:47, and even the seventh-place swimmer had gone 4:02. Riley pulled herself out of the pool, water streaming from her hair and suit as she walked past the other swimmers who were warming down or preparing for their second events. She could feel eyes on her, could sense the mixture of pity and confusion from competitors who couldn't understand how someone with such a slow time had ended up at an elite time trial. Coach Martinez was waiting for her, with the stopwatch still in her hand, her expression unreadable. Riley prepared herself for polite dismissal, for the kind of gentle letdown that adults gave to kids who had tried their best but simply weren't good enough. Instead, Martinez looked directly at Riley with those calculating eyes and delivered the words that would echo in Riley's mind for months to come. "That's the worst 400-meter freestyle I've seen in 23 years of coaching. You'll never make it here."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The drive home from Riverside Aquatic Academy was silent except for the hum of Marcus's truck engine and the occasional rustle of fast food wrappers on the dashboard. Riley stared out the passenger window, watching the Ohio countryside blur past in shades of green and brown. Her damp hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her skin still smelled faintly of chlorine despite the quick shower she'd taken at the facility. Marcus finally broke the silence when they were halfway back to Millbrook. "You know, I've seen a lot of swimmers get cut down by coaches over the years." Riley didn't respond. She was replaying Coach Martinez's words in her mind, hearing them in different tones and inflections, as if changing the delivery might somehow change the meaning. "Some of them deserve it," Marcus continued, keeping his eyes on the road. "Some of them are lazy or entitled or think they're better than they actually are. But Martinez," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "Martinez doesn't waste time on swimmers she doesn't see potential in. She doesn't bother crushing dreams unless she thinks there might actually be something worth crushing." Riley turned to look at him, confusion creasing her forehead. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Marcus said, "that she wouldn't have said anything at all if she didn't think you had something worth developing. Bad swimmers get polite rejection letters. Swimmers with potential get the treatment you just received." Riley wasn't sure she believed him, but something in Marcus's tone made her want to. They drove the rest of the way in contemplative silence, Riley's mind churning with possibilities and doubts in equal measure. That night, Riley lay in bed staring at the ceiling of her small bedroom, listening to the familiar sounds of her family's house settling around her. Down the hall, she could hear her parents having their nightly conversation in Mandarin, their voices low and tired after another long day at the shop. Danny was in the room next to hers, probably playing video games with his headphones on, still avoiding any activities that required leaving the house. Riley pulled out her phone and did something she had never done before. She researched Helena Martinez. What she found was intimidating. Martinez had been a competitive swimmer herself in college, earning All-American honors at Ohio State before injuries ended her competitive career. She had started coaching immediately after graduation, working her way up from assistant positions at local clubs to head coach at Riverside. Her swimmers had broken dozens of state records over the years. 3 of her former athletes had made Olympic trials, and 1 had actually made the Olympic team, finishing 6th in the 200 butterfly at the London Games. Riley scrolled through photos of Martinez with her successful swimmers, all of them holding trophies or medals, all of them looking like they had been born in the water. She found interview articles where Martinez talked about her coaching philosophy, her emphasis on technical perfection and mental toughness. "I don't coach swimmers," Martinez had told a local newspaper reporter 2 years earlier. "I coach people who happen to express themselves through swimming. The difference is that swimmers focus on times and technique. People focus on becoming the best version of themselves, and fast times are just a byproduct of that transformation."
Riley read the quote 3 times before closing her phone and rolling over, pulling her pillow over her head. The next morning, she was at the community pool before Marcus arrived for their regular training session. She had convinced the facility manager to let her in early by offering to help with pool maintenance, and she spent 45 minutes swimming easy laps, focusing on the feel of the water moving past her body. When Marcus walked onto the pool deck at 6 a.m., he found Riley finishing a set of 200-meter swims, her stroke looking smoother and more controlled than he had seen it before. "You're here early," he observed, setting down his coaching bag and checking the pace clock. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," Riley said, treading water at the wall. "About Coach Martinez only bothering to crush dreams she thinks are worth crushing." Marcus pulled out his stopwatch and clipboard, settling into his familiar position on the pool deck. "And what did you conclude?" "I concluded," Riley said, adjusting her goggles, "that I want to prove her wrong." Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that coaches get when they realize their athlete has just discovered their competitive fire. "Good, because I've been thinking too, and I have some ideas about how we're going to make that happen." What Marcus had been thinking about was a complete overhaul of Riley's training program. Up until now, they had been focused on basic technique and fitness, the kind of foundation work that every new swimmer needs to develop. But if Riley was serious about proving Coach Martinez wrong, they needed to think bigger. Marcus had spent his own money on a video camera system that could record underwater footage, and he had Riley swim a series of different strokes while he filmed her from multiple angles. They spent an hour reviewing the footage, with Marcus pointing out technical flaws that Riley had never been aware of. "See how your left hand enters the water about 6 inches closer to the center line than your right hand?" Marcus said, pausing the video at the moment of hand entry. "That's creating a slight scissor kick to compensate for the imbalance. It's costing you about 2 seconds per 100 meters. They worked on hand entry positions for 30 minutes, with Marcus using pool noodles and kickboards to give Riley visual and tactile references for proper technique. It was tedious, methodical work, the kind of detail-oriented training that separated serious swimmers from recreational ones. Marcus also introduced Riley to dryland training for the first time. 3 mornings a week, they met at the community center's small fitness room before pool practice, where Marcus put Riley through routines designed specifically for swimmers. Core strengthening exercises, shoulder stability work, and flexibility training that would help her achieve better body position in the water. "Swimming isn't just about what happens in the pool," Marcus explained as Riley struggled through her 3rd set of planks. "Elite swimmers are athletes first, swimmers second. Your body is your equipment, and right now your equipment needs some upgrades." Riley threw herself into the new training regimen with an intensity that surprised even Marcus. She arrived early for every session, stayed late to work on technique drills, and began asking questions that she was thinking about swimming even when she wasn't in the pool. "Why do some swimmers breathe every 2 strokes and others breathe every 3?" she asked while working on breathing pattern drills.
"It depends on the distance and the swimmer's individual physiology," Marcus explained. "Bilateral breathing, every 3 strokes, helps with stroke balance and technique, but some swimmers need more oxygen than that pattern provides. The key is finding what works best for you in different situations." Riley began experimenting with different breathing patterns during her training sets, keeping detailed notes about how each pattern affected her stroke rate, her fatigue levels, and her times. She was becoming a student of the sport, not just a participant. The changes in Riley's swimming weren't immediately obvious to casual observers, but Marcus could see the improvements accumulating week by week. Her stroke became more efficient, her body position improved, and her underwater streamlining after starts and turns began to look genuinely competitive. More importantly, Riley's times began to drop consistently. The 400 freestyle that had taken her 4:23 at the Riverside time trial was now a 4:12 in practice. Her 100 freestyle had dropped from 1:37 to 1:29. The improvements weren't dramatic enough to catch anyone's attention, but they were real and they were consistent. Marcus decided it was time to test Riley against some actual competition. The Tri-County Age Group Championships were held every October at a regional aquatic center about 2 hours south of Millbrook.
It wasn't a particularly prestigious meet. Most of the elite swimmers from the area skipped it in favor of bigger competitions, but it drew several hundred swimmers from smaller clubs and high school teams across 3 counties. Marcus registered Riley for 3 events: the 200 freestyle, 400 freestyle, and 100 backstroke. The backstroke was a gamble. Riley had only been working on the stroke for a few months, but Marcus had noticed that her natural feel for body position made her surprisingly effective at the stroke. The meet was held in an aging but well-maintained facility with an 8-lane, 25-yard pool. The warm-up area was crowded with swimmers from dozens of different teams, their colorful warm-up suits and team jackets creating a kaleidoscope of competitive swimming culture. Riley felt the familiar flutter of nerves as she surveyed the competition during warm-ups. These weren't the elite swimmers she had encountered at Riverside, but they were experienced competitors with years of training behind them. Most of them moved through their warm-up routines with the kind of casual confidence that comes from racing regularly. Riley's first event was the 200 freestyle, and she was seeded 13th out of 16 swimmers in her age group. The event would be swum as timed finals, meaning there were no preliminary heats. Whatever time you swam in the final was your official result. Marcus walked Riley through her race strategy as they sat in the bleachers waiting for her event to be called. "Don't worry about what anyone else is doing," he said. "Swim your own race. Go out conservatively for the first 100, build through the middle 100, and then see what you have left for the last 50. Riley nodded, but she was watching the other swimmers in her event, trying to gauge their level of experience from the way they carried themselves, the quality of their equipment, the confidence in their pre-race routines. When the 200 freestyle was called, Riley made her way to the staging area behind the starting blocks. She was assigned lane 2, traditionally reserved for slower swimmers, while the fastest seed was in lane 4. Riley tried to ignore the fact that the swimmer in lane 4 was wearing a technical suit that probably cost more than Riley's family spent on groceries in a month. The starter called the swimmers to the blocks, and Riley stepped up, adjusting her goggles one final time. She looked down at the lane rope to her right, then to her left, trying to center herself in the moment. "Swimmers, take your mark." The starting signal sent 8 swimmers diving into the pool simultaneously. Riley's start was clean, her entry angle sharp enough to minimize splash. She surfaced and immediately settled into the stroke rhythm she had been practicing for months. For the first 100 meters, Riley held her position in the middle of the pack. She could see swimmers on either side of her, could sense the leaders pulling ahead in the center lanes, but she stuck to Marcus's race plan and focused on maintaining smooth, efficient technique. At the 100 mark, Riley executed her first racing flip turn, pushing off the wall with more power than she had ever generated in practice. As she surfaced and began the third length, something clicked. The hours of technical work, the dryland training, the endless repetition of drill sets suddenly crystallized into a feeling of speed and efficiency she had never experienced before. Riley began to move up in the field. By the 150 mark, she had passed 2 swimmers and was closing on a third. Her stroke rate was still controlled, her breathing still relaxed, but she was covering ground with each stroke cycle. The last 50 meters of a 200 freestyle is where races are won and lost, where months of training are distilled into pure speed and willpower. Riley could hear the crowd noise increasing as the swimmers approached the finish, could see the splash and fury of the faster swimmers in the center lanes. With 25 meters to go, Riley made her move. She increased her stroke rate without losing efficiency, drawing on reserves of speed she didn't know she possessed. She passed the swimmer in lane 3, then began closing on lane 4. The last 10 meters were a blur of churning water and burning muscles. Riley drove toward the wall with everything she had, her stroke shortening slightly as fatigue set in, but her determination never wavering. She touched the wall and immediately turned to look at the scoreboard, gasping for air and trying to process what had just happened. The times flickered on the display as the automatic timing system calculated the results. Lane 2, Chen Riley, 2:11.47, third place. Riley stared at the time, certain there had been a mistake. She had never broken 2:15 in practice, had never imagined she could swim that fast. But there it was, officially recorded, witnessed by judges and timing systems. Marcus was waiting for her at the side of the pool, his stopwatch in one hand and a huge grin on his face. "Do you know what you just did?" he asked as Riley pulled herself out of the water. Riley shook her head, still trying to catch her breath. "You just swam a time that would have qualified for the state high school championships. You just proved that Coach Martinez was wrong about you."
Riley looked back at the scoreboard, where her time was still displayed. 2:11.47. It was just numbers on a display, but it represented something much more significant. Proof that she belonged in competitive swimming, that her months of training and dedication had produced something real and measurable. But even as she celebrated her breakthrough performance, Riley knew this was just the beginning. Breaking 2:12 in the 200 freestyle was impressive for someone who had been swimming seriously for less than a year, but it was still nowhere near the level of the swimmers training at Riverside Athletic Academy. If she really wanted to prove Coach Martinez wrong, if she really wanted to show that she could make it, Riley knew she had a lot more work to do. The question was whether she was ready for what that work would require. Winter in Ohio meant indoor training, shorter days, and the kind of bone-deep cold that made the heated community pool feel like a tropical paradise. Riley had been swimming competitively for 8 months now, and what had started as family therapy sessions had evolved into something approaching obsession. The breakthrough at Tri-County Championships had opened doors Riley hadn't even known existed. Within a week of that meet, she received emails from 3 different college recruiters who had noticed her times in the regional rankings database. None of them were from elite programs, but the fact that college coaches were even aware of her existence felt surreal. More importantly, word of Riley's rapid improvement had reached other coaches in the region. Marcus fielded calls from 2 different club programs offering to bring Riley into their training groups, complete with scholarship assistance for the substantial monthly fees that elite swimming required. But Marcus had a different idea. "I think it's time for Phase 2, he announced during a December training session, his breath visible in the frigid morning air as they walked from the parking lot to the pool entrance. Riley was in the middle of her warm-up routine, swimming easy laps to get her body temperature adjusted to the water. Phase 2 of what? Phase 2 of proving Helena Martinez wrong, Marcus said, settling into his usual coaching position on the pool deck. Because dropping 40 seconds in your first competitive season is impressive, but it's not going to be enough to get her attention. Marcus had been researching Martinez's coaching methods, studying video footage of her swimmers, and analyzing the training programs that produced state and national level athletes. What he discovered was both intimidating and illuminating. Elite swimmers didn't just train harder than recreational swimmers, they trained smarter, with periodized programs that built fitness systematically over months and years. They incorporated technology, sports science, and recovery methods that most people associated with professional sports rather than age group swimming. "Starting next month," Marcus said, "we're going to train like you're already an elite swimmer, even if your times don't reflect that yet." The new training program was unlike anything Riley had experienced. Instead of the intuitive, technique-focused approach Marcus had used during her first year, they now followed a structured periodization plan with distinct phases for base building, lactate threshold development, and race preparation. Riley's training volume increased from 12,000 meters per week to 20,000 meters per week. She was in the water 6 days a week now, with double sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays that meant 5 a.m. training before school and another session in the evening. Marcus had also convinced the community center to give them access to the pool during normally closed hours, which meant Riley often found herself swimming alone in the eerily quiet facility at 6 p.m. on weeknights, the underwater lights casting wavering patterns on the ceiling as she worked through demanding sets. The training sets themselves became more sophisticated. Instead of swimming straight distances, Riley worked on complex combinations designed to stress different energy systems. Lactate threshold sets that pushed her to the edge of sustainable pace for extended periods. Power sets with short, explosive repeats designed to develop speed.
technique sets that focused on specific aspects of stroke mechanics while maintaining high intensity. Marcus invested in a portable lactate analyzer, a device that measured the concentration of lactic acid in Riley's blood during and after training sets. It was the kind of equipment typically found at elite training centers, not community pools in small Ohio towns. Elite swimmers train at specific lactate concentrations for specific adaptations, Marcus explained, as he pricked Riley's finger for a blood sample after a particularly brutal set of 8x200 freestyle repeats. If we can monitor your lactate response, we can make sure you're training at the right intensities to maximize improvement. The lactate readings allowed Marcus to fine-tune Riley's training with scientific precision. He learned that Riley's lactate threshold, the pace she could sustain for extended periods, occurred at a faster speed than most swimmers her age, which explained her ability to negative split races and finish strong. More importantly, the data showed that Riley's physiology was adapting rapidly to the increased training load. Her resting heart rate dropped from 68 beats per minute to 54. Her lactate clearance improved dramatically, meaning she could recover more quickly between hard efforts. But the physical adaptations were only part of the transformation. The demanding training schedule was reshaping Riley's entire life in ways she hadn't anticipated. School became something she endured between training sessions. While her classmates worried about weekend plans and social media drama, Riley was calculating how many hours of sleep she could get between evening practice and morning practice. Her grades didn't suffer. If anything, the discipline required for elite training made academic work seem easy by comparison. But her social life essentially disappeared. Her parents initially worried about Riley's increasingly single-minded focus on swimming. The family electronics shop was struggling financially, and they couldn't understand why their daughter was investing so much time and energy into a sport that seemed to offer uncertain career prospects. "Swimming doesn't pay the bills," her father said during one particularly tense dinner conversation. "You need to focus on your studies, maybe consider studying business so you can help with the shop." Riley understood her parents' concerns, but she also felt something they couldn't comprehend: the intoxicating possibility of discovering how fast she could actually become. Every time she thought she had reached her limit, her times dropped further. Every time Marcus increased her training load, her body adapted and responded with improved performance. The winter months became a blur of early morning alarms, chlorine-scented training gear, and the rhythmic counting of laps. Riley's world contracted to the length of a swimming pool, measured in stroke counts and split times. In February, Marcus arranged for Riley to attend a training camp with a group of elite age group swimmers from around the Midwest. The camp was held at a university natatorium with Olympic standard facilities and coaching from former national team members. It was Riley's first exposure to truly elite swimming culture, and it was both inspiring and humbling. The other swimmers at the camp had been training seriously for 5 or more years. They spoke casually about meets Riley had only read about online, about times that Riley could barely imagine achieving. But Riley also noticed that her training partners were impressed with her work ethic and her ability to handle challenging sets. During one particularly difficult practice, a main set of 20 by 100 freestyle on a demanding interval, Riley was one of only 3 swimmers who completed the entire set without missing any of the prescribed rest periods. "Where did you learn to suffer like that?" asked Jennifer Walsh, a nationally ranked butterflyer from Michigan who had been training with elite coaches since she was 10 years old. Riley paused, considering the question. "I don't know if I learned it," she finally said. "I think maybe I just got tired of not being good enough." The camp coach, a former Olympic swimmer named David Chen, pulled Riley aside after the final practice session. "Marcus tells me you've only been swimming seriously for about 10 months, he said. Riley nodded, suddenly self-conscious about her relative inexperience compared to the other campers. "That's remarkable," Chen continued. "Not just your improvement rate, but your training maturity. You train like someone who's been doing this for years. That's not something that can be taught." Chen asked Riley about her goals, her timeline for improvement, her thoughts about college swimming. When Riley mentioned that she ultimately wanted to prove herself at the elite level, Chen's expression became serious. "There's something you should know about elite swimming," he said. "It's not really about swimming. Swimming is just a vehicle. Elite swimming is about becoming the kind of person who can handle pressure, who can maintain focus when everything is on the line, who can find another gear when they think they have nothing left." Chen paused, studying Riley's reaction. "From what I've observed this week, you might already be that kind of person. The question is whether you're ready to find out." The conversation stayed with Riley during the drive home from the camp. She had always framed her swimming goals in terms of proving Coach Martinez wrong, but Chen's words made her realize that her motivation had evolved beyond simple defiance. She was swimming now because she was genuinely curious about her own potential, because the process of systematic improvement had become its own reward. March brought the high school championship season, and Marcus convinced the local high school coach to allow Riley to swim as an exhibition competitor in several meets. Exhibition swimmers couldn't score points for the team, but they could race against varsity-level competition and establish official times. Riley's first high school meet was a revelation. The competition was significantly faster than the club meets she had been attending, and the atmosphere was more intense, with packed bleachers and schools creating organized cheering sections. Swimming exhibition meant Riley was often seated in faster heats than her time suggested, placed alongside swimmers who had been training competitively for their entire teenage years. It was intimidating, but it was also exactly the kind of challenge Riley had been craving. Her first race was the 200 freestyle, the event where she had achieved her breakthrough the previous fall. Riley was seated with a time of 2:11, but she had been training at a much higher level for months and suspected she was significantly faster than her official personal best. The race itself was controlled chaos. Riley found herself in lane 6, surrounded by swimmers whose entry times were all faster than hers. The pace felt aggressive from the start, with the swimmers in the center lanes pulling away from the field immediately. But Riley had learned to trust her race strategy during the winter months of training. She stayed patient through the first 100 meters, focusing on technical efficiency rather than trying to match the leaders stroke for stroke. At the 100-meter turn, Riley was in 6th place, about a body length behind the leaders. Her split time was 1:02, nearly 3 seconds faster than she had ever split the first 100 of a 200 freestyle. She was on pace for a massive personal best, but she was still trailing swimmers who looked comfortable and controlled. The third 100 meters became a test of the fitness Riley had built through months of demanding training. Instead of fading as she had in previous races, Riley began to move through the field. Her stroke rate increased slightly, but her technique remained solid, her breathing pattern never becoming labored. By the 150-meter mark, Riley had moved into 4th place. She could see the swimmer in lane 5 struggling slightly, her stroke beginning to shorten as fatigue set in. Riley sensed opportunity. The final 50 meters of the race were swum at a pace Riley had never experienced before. She negatively split the race dramatically, swimming the second 100 meters nearly 4 seconds faster than the first 100. She passed the struggling swimmer in lane 5, then began closing on the leaders in lanes 3 and 4. Riley finished 3rd in the race, touching the wall with a time that caused Marcus to do a double take at his stopwatch. 2:04.73. It was a 7-second personal best, achieved at a meet where Riley was swimming. More significantly, it was a time that qualified for the state high school championships and moved Riley into the top 20 in her age group nationally. The time also put Riley squarely on the radar of college recruiters at a completely different level. Within 48 hours of the meet results being posted online, Riley received emails from Division I programs she had only dreamed of attending. But the email that mattered most came from a different source entirely. Coach Helena Martinez had been following Riley's progress through the regional swimming community, which was small enough that word of a rapidly improving swimmer spread quickly. Martinez had seen Riley's time from the high school meet, had done the calculations about her rate of improvement, and had reached a conclusion that surprised even her. The email arrived on a Thursday evening while Riley was doing homework at the kitchen table, still wearing her damp practice clothes from the evening training session.
Miss Chen, the email began, I have been following your competitive results over the past several months with interest. Your rate of improvement suggests that my initial assessment of your potential may have been incomplete. I would like to invite you to join a small group of elite swimmers for a training camp at Riverside Aquatic Academy next month. The camp is by invitation only and is designed to identify swimmers with the potential to compete at the national level. If you are interested, please contact me to discuss the details. Riley read the email 3 times before showing it to her parents, then called Marcus immediately. She's inviting me to an elite training camp, Riley said, her voice shaking with excitement and disbelief. Coach Martinez, the woman who told me I'd never make it. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Are you ready for that? He finally asked. Riley thought about the question, considering everything that had led to this moment. The accident that had introduced her to swimming, the months of grinding technical work, the transformation of her entire life around training and competition. I think, Riley said, I'm ready to find out. The Riverside Aquatic Academy training camp was scheduled for the first week of April, during spring break. Riley had 3 weeks to prepare, which Marcus treated as the most crucial preparation period of her swimming career to date. This wasn't just another competition. It was Riley's chance to train alongside swimmers who were already operating at the level she aspired to reach. Elite training camps aren't about impressing coaches with your current times, Marcus explained during their strategy session. They're about demonstrating that you can handle the training load, the mental pressure, and the competitive environment of elite swimming. Martinez isn't inviting you because you're already fast enough. She's inviting you because she wants to see if you can become fast enough. Marcus restructured Riley's training for the 3-week preparation period, focusing on preparing her body and mind for the intensity she would encounter at Riverside. The sets became more challenging, designed to simulate the kind of demanding training that elite swimmers handled routinely. One particularly brutal session involved a main set of 8x400 freestyle intervals. Each one swum at negative split pace, with only 30 seconds of rest between repeats. It was the kind of set that would have been impossible for Riley when she started swimming seriously, but she completed it successfully, hitting target times on every repeat. That set would break most swimmers, Marcus observed as Riley recovered from the final 400. The fact that you're not just surviving it, but executing it properly, tells me you're ready for what you're going to encounter at camp. Riley spent the preparation weeks studying video footage of elite swimmers, analyzing their stroke techniques, race strategies, and training methods. She watched recordings of national championship races, paying particular attention to how the fastest swimmers managed their energy throughout long, demanding events. But the most significant preparation happened in Riley's mind. She had learned to visualize training sets and races in detail, mentally rehearsing not just the physical execution, but also her emotional and psychological responses to different scenarios. What would she do if she fell behind early in a race? How would she respond if a training set became more difficult than expected? How would she handle the inevitable moments of doubt that came with elite competition? The drive to Riverside for the training camp felt different from Riley's first visit to the facility 18 months earlier. Instead of nervous uncertainty, Riley felt focused anticipation. She was still intimidated by what lay ahead, but she was no longer questioning whether she belonged there. The camp roster included 12 swimmers from across the Midwest, all of them either nationally ranked in their age groups or showing the kind of rapid improvement that suggested future elite potential. Riley recognized several names from national ranking lists, swimmers whose times she had studied and whose competition results she had followed. Coach Martinez conducted the camp's opening meeting in the same conference room where Riley had once sat as a hopeful outsider trying to understand elite swimming culture. Now she was sitting among swimmers who were already living that culture, and she realized how much her perspective had changed. This camp is not about making anyone feel comfortable, Martinez announced to the assembled swimmers. Comfort is the enemy of improvement. Over the next 5 days, we're going to push you beyond your current limits in every aspect of training. Some of you will respond positively to that stress,
Others will break down. The swimmers who respond positively are the ones who have the potential to compete at the highest levels. Martinez's gaze moved around the room, making brief eye contact with each swimmer. When her eyes met Riley, Riley detected something that might have been approval, though Martinez's expression remained neutral. "Chen," Martinez said, addressing Riley directly, "when you were here last year, your 400 freestyle time was 4:23. What's your current best time in that event?" Riley felt every eye in the room turn toward her. She was being singled out, and she suspected this was Martinez's way of establishing her credibility with the other swimmers. "I haven't raced a 400 freestyle since that time trial," Riley answered honestly. "But based on my training times and my current 200 freestyle best, I estimate I could go around 4:05. Martinez nodded. "We'll find out tomorrow. The camp will conclude with time trials in each swimmer's primary events. Your improvement over the next 5 days will determine if you're invited to join our year-round training group." The first training session was a wake-up call. The warm-up alone was longer and more intensive than many of Riley's previous main sets. The swimmers completed 1,000 meters of easy swimming, followed by 800 meters of build swimming that progressively increased in pace, then 600 meters of stroke drills, and finally 400 meters of sprint preparation. By the time they reached the main set, Riley had already swum more than half of what would have been a complete workout during her early training with Marcus. But at Riverside, the warm-up was just preparation for the real work. The main set was a lactate tolerance challenge, 5x300 freestyle with descending rest intervals. The first 300 had 60 seconds of rest. The second had 45 seconds. The third had 30 seconds. The fourth had 15 seconds, and the final 300 had no rest at all. Swimmers touched the wall from the fourth repeat and immediately began the fifth. Riley had never attempted anything close to this level of training stress. The first 2 repeats felt controlled, well within her capabilities. The third repeat was challenging but manageable. The fourth repeat pushed her into oxygen debt, and by the time she touched the wall to begin the fifth repeat with no rest, her legs felt like concrete and her stroke was beginning to deteriorate.
But Riley had learned something important during her months of preparation. Elite swimming wasn't about avoiding discomfort. It was about performing effectively despite discomfort. She focused on maintaining her stroke technique even as her body screamed for rest, on finding rhythm and efficiency even as lactate flooded her muscles. When she touched the wall after the final 300, Riley was exhausted but victorious. She had completed the entire set successfully, hitting target times that Martinez had posted on the pace clock. More importantly, she had demonstrated to herself and to the other swimmers that she could handle elite-level training stress. After the session, Riley was approached by 2 of the nationally ranked swimmers who had been watching her during the difficult set. "That was impressive," said Kevin Morrison, a 17-year-old who held several regional records in butterfly events. "Most swimmers break down on that set during their first camp here. How long have you been training with elite groups?" "This is my first elite camp," Riley answered, toweling off her hair. Kevin and his training partner, Sarah Fleming, exchanged glances. "Seriously?" Sarah asked. "How long have you been swimming competitively?" "About 16 months," Riley said. The conversation that followed revealed just how unusual Riley's trajectory had been. Most of the other campers had been swimming competitively for 6 to 10 years. They had progressed through age group programs, regional teams, and increasingly elite training environments over the course of their entire teenage years. Riley's rapid ascent from complete beginner to elite camp participant was unprecedented in their experience. But rather than treating her as an outsider, the other swimmers seemed genuinely curious about her background and her training methods. "What's your secret?" asked Dylan Torres, a distance freestyler whose best times would have qualified him for Olympic trials in several events. "I don't know if I have a secret," Riley said. "I just really hate the idea of not reaching my potential." The second day of camp introduced Riley to racing tactics and strategy in ways she had never experienced. Instead of simply swimming fast, the swimmers worked on race scenarios: how to respond when an opponent made an early move, how to time a finishing kick for maximum effectiveness, how to maintain composure when falling behind.
Martinez paired the swimmers for practice races throughout the week, constantly changing the combinations to create different competitive dynamics. Riley found herself racing against swimmers who were significantly faster than her in some events, and learning to compete effectively despite being outclassed on paper. In one memorable practice race, Riley was matched against Sarah Fleming in a 200 freestyle. Sarah's personal best was 1:58, 6 seconds faster than Riley's best time. Under normal circumstances, the race wouldn't have been competitive. But Martinez structured the race as a handicap situation, with Riley getting a 3-second head start based on the difference in their personal best. The goal was to simulate the kind of tactical racing that occurred at major championships, where swimmers had to manage leads, respond to challenges, and make strategic decisions under pressure. Riley used her head start to establish an early lead, but she could feel Sarah closing the gap throughout the race. With 50 meters remaining, Sarah had nearly eliminated Riley's advantage. In the final 25 meters, Riley had to find speed she didn't know she possessed just to hold on for a narrow victory. That, Martinez said afterward, is how you learn to race under pressure. Technical speed means nothing if you can't access it when the competition demands it. The psychological pressure of training with swimmers who were already nationally competitive pushed Riley to new levels of performance. During a challenging distance set on the third day of camp, Riley achieved training times that would have translated to personal bests in actual competition. But the most significant breakthrough occurred during a race-pace practice session on the fourth day. Martinez had the swimmers complete time trials in their primary events, simulating competition conditions with electronic timing and formal starts. Riley's event was the 400 freestyle, the same race where she had posted her infamous 4:23 time trial that had prompted Martinez's harsh assessment 18 months earlier. This time, Riley was seated in the middle of the field based on her estimated times, racing against swimmers who regularly competed at national-level meets. The race strategy Riley had developed with Marcus was simple: controlled aggression. Go out fast enough to stay with the field, build speed through the middle of the race, and then trust her fitness and mental toughness to carry her through the final 100 meters. Riley's start was technically sound, her entry clean, and her underwater streamline carrying her nearly to the 15-meter mark before she surfaced. Her stroke immediately found the rhythm she had been practicing for months: long, powerful strokes that moved her through the water with visible efficiency. The first 100 meters established the race dynamics. Riley was positioned fourth in the six-swimmer field, about half a body length behind the leaders. Her split time was 58.2 seconds, aggressive but sustainable based on her training. Through the second 100 meters, Riley maintained her position while the pace began to separate the field. The two leaders, both nationally ranked swimmers, were setting a demanding pace that was beginning to affect the other competitors. Riley held steady, splitting 1:57.8 at the 200-meter mark. The third 100 meters became a test of race tactics and fitness. One of the early leaders began to fade, dropping back through the field as the pace took its toll. Riley moved into third place, then second, while the remaining leader appeared to be swimming comfortably. With 100 meters remaining, Riley was in second place, about 1 second behind the leader. This was the moment that would define not just the race, but her entire swimming trajectory. She had never been in contention for victory against swimmers of this caliber. The safe approach would be to hold her position and finish with a respectable second-place performance. Instead, Riley made the kind of decision that separates elite competitors from everyone else. She decided to race to win. Riley's final 100 meters was a masterpiece of controlled speed and tactical awareness. Instead of dramatically increasing her stroke rate, she focused on maximizing the power and efficiency of each stroke. Her technique remained solid even as her pacing increased, her breathing pattern staying controlled despite the building oxygen debt. With 50 meters remaining, Riley had closed to within half a body length of the leader. The other swimmer was beginning to show signs of distress, her stroke shortening slightly as fatigue accumulated. Riley sensed vulnerability and pressed her advantage. The final 25 meters were swum at a pace that pushed both swimmers beyond their previous limits. Riley drew even with the leader at the 15-meter mark, then began to edge ahead as they approached the wall.
Her stroke was still technically sound, still generating power, while her opponent's stroke was beginning to break down under the pressure. Riley touched the wall a full body length ahead of the second-place swimmer, winning her first race against nationally competitive opposition. But it was the time on the scoreboard that truly mattered, 3:58:14. Riley had broken the 4-minute barrier in the 400 freestyle, a benchmark that separated truly competitive swimmers from everyone else. More importantly, she had achieved the time while racing tactically, managing her energy throughout the race and finishing with her fastest split. The pool deck erupted in applause from the other swimmers and coaches who had been watching the race. Even Martinez allowed herself a small smile as she recorded Riley's time in her coaching notes. But for Riley, the significance of the swim went beyond the time itself. She had proven that she could compete effectively against swimmers who had been training at elite levels for years. She had demonstrated race tactics, mental toughness, and the ability to perform under pressure. Most importantly, she had answered the question that had been driving her for 18 months. She could make it at the elite level. As Riley climbed out of the pool, still breathing hard from the effort, Martinez approached her with an expression that Riley had never seen before. It wasn't quite warm, but it was unmistakably respectful. That, Martinez said, was the swim of someone who belongs here. It was vindication 18 months in the making, but Riley realized that proving Martinez wrong had stopped being the point somewhere along the way. Now she was swimming to discover just how fast she could become, and breaking 4 minutes in the 400 freestyle was just the beginning of that journey. The invitation to join Riverside Athletic Academy's elite training group came with conditions that would have seemed impossible to Riley just 2 years earlier. Full-time training meant relocating to live near the facility, training twice daily 6 days a week, and committing to a lifestyle that revolved entirely around swimming performance. Riley's parents struggled with the decision. The family electronics shop was barely surviving, and losing Riley's part-time help would create additional strain. More concerning was the financial reality. Even with the partial scholarship Martinez offered, elite training required resources the Chen family simply didn't have. The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Patricia Thornton, the family physician who had originally recommended aquatic therapy for Danny, had been following Riley's swimming career with fascination. As a former college athlete herself, she understood the rarity of Riley's talent and the time-sensitive nature of athletic development. "I'd like to sponsor Riley's training," Dr. Thornton announced during a meeting with the Chen family in May. "Consider it an investment in proving that extraordinary things can happen when we give people the opportunity to discover their potential." Dr. Thornton's sponsorship covered Riley's training fees, equipment costs, and living expenses for a shared apartment near Riverside Academy. In return, Riley would work part-time at Dr. Thornton's clinic, helping with patient rehabilitation programs and serving as an inspiration for other young athletes recovering from injuries. Riley's transition to full-time elite training was jarring in ways she hadn't anticipated. Training with Marcus had been demanding, but it had also been personal, focused on her individual development. At Riverside, Riley was part of a high-performance training environment where every swimmer was pushing toward national and international competition. The training volume was staggering. Riley's daily schedule began with a 5:30 a.m. alarm for dry land conditioning, followed by a 2-hour morning swim practice, then academic work through online courses, an afternoon recovery session, a second swim practice in the evening, and additional strength training 3 times per week. But it was the competitive environment that truly challenged Riley. Every practice involved swimmers who were already operating at levels she was still working to reach. The pace clock became a relentless judge, measuring not just speed, but consistency, technical proficiency, and mental toughness. Martinez's coaching style at the elite level was different from what Riley had experienced during the training camp. The feedback was more direct, the expectations higher, and the margin for error smaller.
Martinez expected her swimmers to understand complex training concepts, to analyze their own performance critically, and to take ownership of their development. Elite swimmers coach themselves as much as they're coached by others, Martinez explained during one of Riley's early weeks at Riverside. I can design the training program and provide technical guidance, but you have to become the expert on your own body, your own racing, and your own mental approach. Riley threw herself into this self-coaching process with characteristic intensity. She kept detailed training logs that tracked not just times and distances, but also technical notes, fatigue levels, and psychological observations. She studied underwater video footage of her strokes, identifying technical flaws that were invisible above the surface. Most importantly, Riley began to understand the difference between training fast and racing fast. Training was about building fitness, developing technique, and preparing the body for competition stress. Racing was about accessing that preparation under pressure, about performing optimally when everything was on the line. The first major test of Riley's development came at the Summer Junior National Championships in August, less than 4 months after joining the Riverside Training Group. Junior Nationals represented the highest level of age group competition in the United States, drawing the fastest swimmers from across the country. Riley qualified in 3 events: the 200 freestyle, 400 freestyle, and 800 freestyle. Her qualifying times placed her middle of the pack in each event, competitive but not favored for finals appearances. The meet was held at a state-of-the-art aquatic center in Florida, with facilities that dwarfed even Riverside Academy. The warm-up pools were larger than most competition venues Riley had experienced, and the main competition pool featured the kind of technology typically seen only at Olympic competitions.
But it was the caliber of competition that truly set junior nationals apart from anything Riley had previously experienced. These weren't just fast swimmers. These were swimmers who had been groomed for elite competition since childhood, who had access to the best coaching, facilities, and support systems in the country. Riley's first event was the 800 freestyle, a grueling test of distance speed and tactical awareness. She was seeded 24th out of 32 swimmers, which meant she would swim in the slower of the 2 timed final sessions. The race strategy Martinez had developed for Riley was based on her emerging strength as a negative split swimmer, controlled aggression through the first 400 meters, then a systematic build through the middle 400 meters, leaving everything in reserve for a powerful final 200 meters. Riley's warm-up routine had become as precise as her stroke technique. 20 minutes of easy swimming to activate her cardiovascular system, followed by progressive build swimming to prepare her nervous system for race pace, then stroke drills to ensure technical readiness, and finally race pace preparation to prime her body for the specific demands of the 800 freestyle. Standing behind the starting blocks before her first junior national race, Riley experienced a moment of perspective that would have seemed impossible during her early days learning to swim at the community pool. She was about to race against the fastest age group swimmers in America, in a sport she had discovered less than 2 years earlier. The starting signal sent 32 swimmers into the water for what would be one of the most tactically complex races Riley had ever swum. The early pace was conservative by elite standards, with most swimmers content to sit and wait for the race to develop over the middle distances. Riley executed her race plan perfectly through the first 400 meters, holding position in the middle of the pack while swimming controlled, technically sound freestyle. Her split times were exactly what Martinez had predicted, and her stroke felt smooth and sustainable. The race began to unfold during the second 400 meters, as swimmers with different race strategies began to separate themselves from the field. Some swimmers moved early, testing the field's willingness to respond. Others remained patient, waiting for the final stages to make their moves. Riley chose a middle approach, gradually increasing her pace through the 500 and 600 meter marks while remaining aware of the swimmers around her. She was swimming in the outside lanes, which made tactical awareness more challenging, but her position in the water felt strong. With 300 meters remaining, Riley made the kind of move that defined her racing style. A sustained, controlled build that would either carry her to a breakthrough performance or expose the limits of her current fitness.
She increased her stroke rate slightly while maintaining technical efficiency, drawing on the extensive lactate tolerance training she had completed at Riverside. The final 200 meters became a showcase of everything Riley had learned about elite racing. Instead of simply trying to swim fast, she raced tactically, responding to moves by other swimmers while maintaining her own race plan. When swimmers around her began to fade, Riley maintained her pace. When others made aggressive moves, Riley covered them without panicking. Riley's final 50 meters were swum at a pace that would have broken her personal best in the 50 freestyle. She passed 3 swimmers in the final length, moving from 14th place to 11th place, and achieving a time that shattered her personal best, 8:34.67. It was a 23-second improvement over her previous best time, achieved in the most competitive environment she had ever experienced. More importantly, it established Riley as a legitimate distance freestyler at the national level, with a time that ranked her in the top 15 in her age group for the year. But Riley's breakthrough at Junior Nationals was just beginning. Her second event was the 400 freestyle, the race where her swimming journey had effectively begun with that devastating 4:23 time trial at Riverside. Riley was seeded 18th, which placed her in the faster of 2 timed final sessions, but well outside medal contention. The 400 freestyle at Junior Nationals represented a completely different level of competition from anything Riley had experienced. The top seeds were swimmers who had already achieved times that would have qualified for senior national teams in many countries. The depth of talent meant that swimmers with times Riley would have considered impossibly fast were seated in the middle of the field. Riley's pre-race routine had evolved into a completely psychological and physical preparation process. She visualized the race in detail, mentally rehearsing her response to different tactical scenarios. She prepared her body through a specific warm-up sequence designed to optimize her neuromuscular system for the demands of 400-meter pace. Most importantly, Riley had learned to manage the psychological pressure of elite competition. Instead of being intimidated by faster swimmers, she had learned to use their presence as motivation to access speed she didn't know she possessed. The call room experience before the 400 freestyle was unlike anything Riley had encountered. Swimmers sat in focused silence, some listening to music, others going through visualization routines, all of them preparing for 4 minutes of racing that would define months of preparation. When the swimmers were called to the pool deck, Riley felt the familiar surge of competitive adrenaline that had become her favorite sensation in swimming. The crowd noise, the intensity of the lighting, the precision of the officiating, everything about the environment demanded peak performance. Riley was assigned lane 2 for the 400 freestyle, traditionally one of the outside lanes reserved for slower qualifiers. But she had learned that lane assignments meant nothing once the race began. What mattered was execution, tactics, and the ability to find another gear when the race demanded it. The start of the race was clean, with all 8 swimmers entering the water smoothly and surfacing in tight formation. Riley's underwater streamlining carried her further than most of the field, and she surfaced in 4th place, well positioned for the tactical race she had planned. The first 100 meters established a pace that was faster than Riley had ever experienced in competition. Her split time was 56.8 seconds, nearly 2 seconds faster than she had ever split the first 100 of a 400. But instead of panicking about the aggressive pace, Riley trusted her fitness and technique. Through the second 100 meters, the race began to separate into distinct groups. The top 3 swimmers established a slight lead over the field, while Riley held position in the chase group, swimming with controlled aggression that kept her in contention without overextending early in the race. At the 200-meter mark, Riley's split time confirmed that she was swimming the race of her life. 1:55.4, a personal best for 200 meters, even though she was only halfway through the 400. But more importantly, she was still moving well, still technically sound, still racing tactically rather than simply trying to survive.
The third 100 meters became a masterclass in race management. As other swimmers began to show signs of the aggressive early pace, Riley maintained her rhythm and technique. She passed 2 swimmers who had been ahead of her, moving into 4th place as the pace began to exact its toll on the field. With 100 meters remaining, Riley was in medal contention at Junior Nationals, racing against swimmers she had only watched on live streams just months earlier. The final 100 meters would determine whether her rapid ascent would culminate in national-level recognition. Riley's finishing kick was a revelation of speed and mental toughness that surprised even Martinez, who was watching from the coaching box with growing excitement. Instead of gradually building speed, Riley found another gear entirely, swimming the final 100 meters faster than she had ever completed any 100 in practice. She passed the swimmer in lane 3, then began closing on the leaders in lanes 4 and 5. With 25 meters remaining, Riley was stroke for stroke with swimmers who had been favored for the podium. The crowd noise became deafening as the field compressed into one of the closest finishes in junior national history. Riley touched the wall and immediately turned to look at the scoreboard, gasping for air and trying to process what had just happened. The times flickered on the display as the automatic timing system calculated the results. Lane 2, Chen, Riley, 3:52.18, second place. Riley stared at the time, certain the display was malfunctioning. She had broken 3:53 in the 400 freestyle, achieving a time that would have been competitive at senior nationals. She had earned a silver medal at junior nationals in an event where she had once been told she would never make it. But more than the time, more than the medal, Riley had proven something fundamental about the nature of athletic potential. She had transformed from a complete beginner to a nationally competitive swimmer in less than 2 years, redefining what was possible when talent met opportunity and relentless dedication. As Riley climbed out of the pool, still breathing hard from the effort, she looked up into the stands where Martinez was standing. For the first time since Riley had known her, Martinez was smiling. Not the small, controlled expression of professional approval, but a genuine smile of amazement and pride. The coach who had once declared that Riley would never make it was now watching her break the Academy's 400 freestyle record in the most competitive environment in age group swimming. But as Riley would discover during her final event at Junior Nationals, breaking one record was just the beginning of what she was capable of achieving. The 200 freestyle, scheduled for the final day of competition, would provide the stage for a performance that would redefine not just Riley's career, but the entire conversation about athletic development and human potential. The girl who had learned to swim to help her brother recover from an accident was about to become the fastest 200 freestyler in the history of one of America's most prestigious swimming academies. The final day of junior nationals arrived with the weight of expectation that Riley had never experienced. Her silver medal in the 400 freestyle had transformed her from an unknown outsider to one of the most talked-about swimmers at the meet. Swimming journalists were asking questions about her background, college recruiters were circling like sharks, and her fellow competitors were studying her technique with newfound respect. But it was the conversation with Martinez the night before her final event that truly crystallized what was at stake. "Do you know what the Academy record is in the 200 freestyle?" Martinez asked as they sat in the hotel lobby reviewing video footage from Riley's 400 freestyle race. Riley shook her head. She had been so focused on her own improvement that she hadn't paid attention to the institutional record she was approaching. 1:48.23, Martinez said, set by Amanda Torres in 2019. Amanda was the most naturally gifted swimmer I coached before you arrived. She went on to swim at Stanford, made the Olympic trials, and is still competing professionally. Martinez paused the video at the moment of Riley's finishing touch in the 400 freestyle. "Your split times from yesterday suggest you're capable of swimming significantly faster than 1:48 in the 200. If you race tomorrow the way you raced yesterday, you won't just break the Academy record, you'll shatter it." Riley studied the frozen image of herself touching the wall, seeing not just the culmination of one race, but the beginning of something much larger. "What happens if I break the record?" "Then," Martinez said, with the kind of smile Riley had learned to recognize as dangerous, "we start talking about Olympic trials." The morning of the 200 freestyle final, Riley's warm-up routine felt different. Every stroke seemed to generate more speed than usual, every drill felt more precise, every race pace effort felt controlled and powerful.
Her body was responding to the training stress of the meet by finding new levels of performance, a phenomenon Martinez called meet speed that separated good swimmers from great ones. Riley's parents had driven down from Ohio for the final day of competition, bringing Danny along to witness what their family had helped create. Seeing them in the stands added an emotional dimension to the competition that Riley hadn't anticipated. This wasn't just about personal achievement anymore. It was about validating the sacrifices and support that had made her journey possible. The 200 freestyle field was loaded with talent that would have been intimidating to Riley just months earlier. The top seed was Jessica Hamilton, a swimmer who had already achieved the Olympic trials qualifying standard and was expected to contend for senior national team positions. The second seed was Maria Santos, a defending junior national champion who had been recruited by multiple elite college programs. Riley was seeded fourth with her personal best time of 151.67, achieved during her breakthrough swim earlier in the season. But seedings meant nothing in championship finals, and Riley had learned that her racing ability often exceeded what her training time suggested. The ready room before the 200 freestyle final was a study in controlled tension. 8 swimmers, each representing years of dedicated training and sacrifice, preparing for 2 minutes of racing that would define their immediate futures. Some swimmers sat in meditative silence, others went through elaborate pre-race routines, but all of them radiated the kind of focused energy that elite competition demands. Riley found herself surprisingly calm as she prepared for the race. The nervousness that had characterized her early competitions had been replaced by confident anticipation. She had learned to trust her preparation, her fitness, and her ability to perform when everything was on the line.
When the swimmers were called to the pool deck for the 200 freestyle final, the energy in the natatorium was electric. Championship finals at junior nationals drew capacity crowds, and the atmosphere rivaled what Riley had seen in Olympic competition broadcasts. Riley walked to lane 4, the center lane traditionally assigned to the fastest qualifier. Her fourth-place seeding had earned her the prime racing position, surrounded by the swimmers who were expected to challenge for the title. The pre-race introductions felt surreal. Hearing her name announced to a capacity crowd, seeing her image on the large video screens around the venue, feeling the weight of expectation from coaches, teammates, and family members who had supported her journey from complete beginner to junior national finalist. Riley's pre-race routine had become as precise as her stroke technique. She tested the starting blocks, adjusted her goggles, and went through a brief visualization of the race she was about to swim. Most importantly, she reminded herself of the key technical and tactical elements that would determine success: clean start, controlled first 100, patient build through the third 50, and then everything she had left for the final 50 meters. "Swimmers, step up," came the command from the starter. Riley stepped onto the starting block and looked down the lane that would determine whether she became just another fast swimmer or something truly special. The water was perfectly still, the lane lines perfectly straight, the timing pads ready to measure whatever performance she was capable of delivering. "Take your mark." The starting signal pierced the arena, and 8 swimmers dove into the water with the kind of precision that comes from years of practiced starts. Riley's entry was clean, her underwater streamlining carrying her nearly to the 15-meter mark before she surfaced in perfect stroke rhythm. The first 50 meters of a 200 freestyle is about establishing position without overextending, and Riley executed this phase flawlessly. She surfaced in third place, exactly where her race plan called for her to be, swimming with the controlled speed that would allow her to build throughout the race. Her first 50 split was 26.84, fast enough to stay with the leaders, controlled enough to leave room for significant negative splitting. The pace felt aggressive but sustainable, exactly the sensation Riley had learned to trust during her most successful races. The second 50 meters began to reveal the tactical dynamics of the race. Jessica Hamilton, the top seed, was setting a demanding pace from lane 5, clearly confident in her ability to hold speed over the full distance.
Maria Santos was matching Hamilton stroke for stroke, turning the race into an early confrontation between the two favorites. Riley held her position in the chase group, swimming patient, technically sound freestyle while the leaders established their early advantage. Her 100-meter split was 55.42, a personal best split that confirmed she was having one of those magical races where everything was working perfectly. But it was during the third 50 meters that Riley began to demonstrate why Martinez had compared her potential to Olympic-level swimmers. Instead of fading as the pace accumulated, Riley began to move through the field with the kind of sustained speed that separated elite swimmers from everyone else. Her stroke rate increased slightly, but her technique remained flawless. Her breathing pattern stayed controlled, her body position remained optimal, and her catch and pull phases generated more propulsion with each stroke cycle. Riley was swimming faster than she ever had before, but it felt easier than it ever had before. By the 150-meter mark, Riley had moved into second place, just half a body length behind Hamilton. Her split time was 1:23.89, another personal best split that put her on pace for a time that would shatter not just the Academy record, but potentially approach the junior national record in the event. The crowd noise was building as spectators realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Riley's splits were being announced over the public address system, and the combination of her rapid improvement and tactical positioning had created the kind of excitement that championship swimming rarely produces. With 50 meters remaining, Riley made the decision that would define her competitive career. Instead of simply trying to hold her position, she decided to race for the victory. Riley's final 50 meters was a masterpiece of speed, technique, and competitive instinct. She increased her stroke rate to levels she had never sustained before, but her technique remained so sound that each stroke generated maximum propulsion. Her underwater phases off the turn carried her further than anyone else in the field, and her surfacing was explosive and controlled. With 25 meters to go, Riley had pulled even with Hamilton. With 15 meters to go, she began to edge ahead. With 10 meters to go, she was leading the Junior National Championships in the 200 freestyle, racing against swimmers who had been considered untouchable just hours earlier. The final 5 meters were swum in a state of controlled fury that Riley had never accessed before. Every technical element she had learned over 2 years of obsessive training came together in a finishing sequence that left no doubt about the outcome. Riley touched the wall a full body length ahead of the field, winning the Junior National Championship in the 200 freestyle and achieving a time that redefined what anyone thought was possible from a swimmer with her limited background. The scoreboard confirmed what the crowd had witnessed. Lane 4, Chen Riley. 146.18, new junior national record. Riley had not just broken the Academy record, she had obliterated it by more than 2 seconds. She had not just won the Junior National Championship, she had set a new championship record that established her as one of the fastest age group swimmers in American history. But the numbers on the scoreboard, impressive as they were, only told part of the story. Riley's splits revealed a performance that defied conventional understanding of swimming development. First 50, 26.84. 100, 55.42. 150, 123.89. Final, 146.18. She had negative split the race by nearly a full second, swimming her second 100 meters in 50.76. A time that would have qualified for junior nationals as a standalone 100 freestyle. Her final 50 split of 22.29 was faster than many swimmers could complete a single 50 freestyle.
As Riley climbed out of the pool, still breathing hard from the effort, she was surrounded by coaches, officials, and media members who were struggling to process what they had just witnessed. A swimmer who had learned the sport less than 3 years earlier had just established herself as one of the most promising talents in American swimming. Martinez was waiting at the side of the pool with an expression of amazement and vindication. The coach who had once declared that Riley would never make it was now watching her athlete rewrite the record books in the most competitive environment in age group swimming. "I need to apologize," Martinez said as she embraced Riley. "When I told you that you'd never make it, I was thinking like a coach who had seen hundreds of swimmers with limited potential. I wasn't thinking like someone who might be watching the beginning of something extraordinary." The awards ceremony for the 200 freestyle was unlike anything Riley had experienced. Standing on the top step of the podium, listening to the national anthem while wearing the gold medal, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 2.5 years earlier, she had been learning basic stroke technique to help her brother recover from a car accident. 18 months earlier, she had been told by one of the most successful coaches in the region that she would never make it in competitive swimming. Now she was the junior national champion and record holder in the 200 freestyle, with times that would make her competitive at the senior national level and put her in the conversation for future Olympic teams. But perhaps the most significant transformation wasn't measured in times or records. Riley had discovered something about the nature of human potential that would influence everything she did for the rest of her life. That limitations were often assumptions rather than realities. That extraordinary achievement was possible when talent met opportunity and relentless dedication. The media interviews after the meet focused on Riley's rapid ascent and what it meant for American swimming. But the questions that mattered most to Riley were the ones she asked herself. What else was she capable of achieving? How fast could she ultimately become? What would happen when she began training for senior-level competition? As Riley walked out of the natatorium with her medal and her shattered records, she was already thinking about the next phase of her journey. The Olympics were just 2 years away, and swimmers with times like hers were expected to contend for spots on the national team. The girl who had once been told she would never make it was now preparing to find out just how far she could go. In the months that followed Junior Nationals, Riley's training intensified even further as she prepared for senior-level competition. Her times continued to drop, her technique continued to evolve, and her competitive maturity grew with each race. By the following summer, Riley was swimming times that would have qualified for the previous Olympic Games. By the time the Olympic trials arrived, she was considered one of the favorites to make the team in multiple events. But that's another story entirely. The story of how a swimmer who was never supposed to make it ended up representing her country on the biggest stage in sports, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the simplest decision to prove someone wrong. The records Riley set at Riverside Academy still stand today, constant reminders that potential is often limited more by imagination than by ability, and that the most devastating thing you can say to someone with true determination is that they'll never make it, because sometimes, just sometimes, they'll spend the rest of their life proving you wrong. The Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs had never seen anything quite like Riley Chen's arrival. At 19, she was the youngest swimmer on the senior national team, but her presence commanded the kind of respect typically reserved for veterans with multiple Olympic appearances. The 2 years following her record-breaking junior nationals had been a whirlwind of international competition, sponsorship opportunities, and the kind of media attention that transforms athletes into public figures. Riley had qualified for her first Olympic team 6 months earlier, not just making the roster, but earning spots in 3 individual events. But success at the highest levels of swimming had taught Riley something that all her early achievements hadn't, that breaking records was easier than managing the pressure of being expected to break them. The training camp before the Olympics brought together the most accomplished swimmers in American history, multiple Olympic champions, world record holders, and athletes whose names were synonymous with swimming excellence. Riley found herself training alongside legends she had watched on television during her early days learning the sport. What surprised these veteran swimmers wasn't Riley's speed, her times spoke for themselves, but her approach to training and competition. Where many elite swimmers had learned to manage their energy and effort, Riley still attacked every practice set as if her career depended on it.
"She trains like someone who's still trying to prove she belongs here," observed Katie Morrison, a three-time Olympian who would become Riley's mentor and training partner. "Most of us learn to cruise through practice and save it for the meets. Riley hasn't figured out how to cruise yet." It was a perceptive observation. Riley's rapid ascent had been fueled by the constant need to prove herself worthy of the next level. But now that she had reached the highest level, she was struggling to adjust her mindset from proving she belonged to simply performing. The psychological adjustment became evident during a practice session 3 weeks before the Olympics. Riley was working through a set of race-pace 200s when she began to struggle midway through the set. Not physically, her fitness was at its peak, but mentally. For the first time in her competitive career, Riley was overthinking her swimming instead of simply swimming. Martinez, who had followed Riley to the national team as an assistant coach, recognized the symptoms immediately. "You're trying to swim like someone else," she told Riley after the disappointing practice session. "You're trying to swim like an experienced Olympian instead of swimming like Riley Chen." The conversation that followed was unlike any coaching discussion Riley had experienced. Instead of focusing on technique or race strategy, Martinez talked about identity and authenticity in competition. "When you first walked into my academy, you had nothing to lose and everything to prove," Martinez said. "That's what made you dangerous. You weren't worried about defending anything or living up to expectations. You were just trying to discover how fast you could go."
Riley realized that somewhere in the process of becoming a recognized elite swimmer, she had lost the sense of exploration and discovery that had fueled her improvement. She was now swimming to maintain her status rather than swimming to expand her potential. The solution came during a conversation with Dr. Patricia Thornton, who had continued to serve as both sponsor and mentor throughout Riley's career. Dr. Thornton had flown to Colorado Springs to visit the training camp and check on her investment in Riley's development. "Do you remember why you started swimming?" Dr. Thornton asked as they sat in the cafeteria of the training center, surrounded by the controlled chaos of elite athletes preparing for the most important competition of their lives. Riley thought about the question, tracing her swimming journey back to its origins. "I started because Danny needed aquatic therapy and I wanted to help him." "And why did you keep swimming after Danny recovered?" Riley paused, considering the deeper motivations that had sustained her through years of demanding training. "Because I wanted to find out what I was capable of achieving." "That curiosity," Dr. Thornton said, "is what separated you from every other swimmer who got told they'd never make it. Most people accept limitations when they encounter them. You treated limitations as puzzles to be solved." The conversation reframed Riley's approach to the upcoming Olympics. Instead of viewing the Games as a culmination of her career, she began to see them as another opportunity to explore the boundaries of her potential. Riley's training in the final weeks before the Olympics returned to the exploratory intensity that had characterized her early development. She stopped worrying about defending her status and started focusing on discovering what else she might be capable of achieving. The transformation was evident in her practice performances. Riley's training times began to approach the world records in her events, suggesting that her competitive performances might produce something truly extraordinary. The U.S. Olympic team's departure for the Games was a media spectacle that reinforced the surreal nature of Riley's journey. Just 4 years earlier, she had been learning basic stroke technique at a community pool. Now she was boarding a chartered flight with the most accomplished athletes in American swimming, expected to contend for multiple Olympic medals. The Olympic Village was unlike anything Riley had experienced, even after years of international competition. Athletes from every sport and every country, all of them representing the pinnacle of human physical achievement, all of them carrying the hopes and expectations of their nations. But it was the Olympic pool itself that truly captured Riley's imagination. The venue was a masterpiece of engineering and design, with facilities that made even the most elite training centers seem modest by comparison.
Every detail was optimized for peak performance, from the water temperature to the lighting to the acoustic properties that would amplify the crowd noise during competition. Riley's first event was the 400 freestyle, the race that had defined her swimming journey from the beginning. The same event where she had posted that devastating 4:23 time trial that prompted Martinez's harsh assessment had become her signature race, the event where she was considered one of the favorites for Olympic gold. The heats and semifinals progressed exactly as expected, with Riley qualifying second for the final, behind the defending Olympic champion. Her semifinal time suggested she was ready for a breakthrough performance, but semifinals meant nothing if she couldn't deliver when it mattered most. The day of the 400 freestyle final, Riley's preparation routine reflected everything she had learned about peak performance over 4 years of elite competition. She arrived at the venue early, went through a precise warm-up sequence, and spent time visualizing not just the race, but her emotional and psychological responses to different scenarios. Most importantly, Riley reminded herself of the mindset that had carried her through every breakthrough in her career: curiosity about her own potential rather than fear of not meeting expectations. The call room before the 400 freestyle final brought together the 8 fastest swimmers in the world, each of them representing years of dedicated preparation and the accumulated expertise of entire national swimming programs. Riley was the youngest swimmer in the field, but she was no longer intimidated by the company she was keeping. Walking onto the pool deck for an Olympic final was everything Riley had imagined and more. The crowd noise was overwhelming, the lighting was intense, and the energy in the venue was unlike anything she had experienced. But instead of being overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment, Riley felt the familiar surge of competitive excitement that had carried her through every important race of her career. Lane assignments for Olympic finals are based on semifinal times, and Riley found herself in lane 6, just outside the center of the pool. It was perfect positioning for the kind of tactical race she had learned to excel at. Close enough to the leaders to respond to their moves, but far enough outside to avoid getting tracked in early congestion. Riley's pre-race routine on the pool deck was brief and focused. She tested the starting blocks, adjusted her goggles, and went through a final mental rehearsal of the race strategy she and Martinez had developed. Most importantly, she reminded herself that this was just another opportunity to explore how fast she could swim. The ready room calm that had characterized Riley's preparation gave way to focused intensity as the swimmers were introduced to the capacity crowd. Hearing her name announced as an Olympic finalist, seeing the American flag next to her lane assignment, feeling the weight of representing her country in the sport's most prestigious event. But when Riley stepped onto the starting block for the 400 freestyle final, all the external pressure and expectations fell away. She was back in the mindset that had defined her entire swimming career: simple curiosity about what she might be capable of achieving. The starting signal sent 8 swimmers into the water for what would become one of the most memorable races in Olympic history. Riley's start was technically perfect, her underwater streamlining carrying her to the surface in ideal position for the tactical race she had planned. The first 100 meters established a pace that was faster than the existing world record, with 3 swimmers separated by less than half a body length. Riley was positioned exactly where she wanted to be: close enough to respond to any moves, patient enough to build throughout the race. Her splits through the middle of the race confirmed that she was swimming the best race of her career. But more importantly, the race felt controlled and sustainable. Exactly the sensation that had preceded every breakthrough performance in her competitive development. With 100 meters remaining in her first Olympic final, Riley made the kind of move that had defined her competitive career: a sustained, controlled build that drew on fitness, technique, and mental toughness that had been developed through years of systematic preparation.
Riley's final 100 meters was a masterpiece of speed and tactical awareness. She moved through the field with the kind of finishing kick that separated Olympic champions from everyone else, touching the wall in a time that shattered the world record and established her as the fastest 400 freestyler in history. 3:49.67, Olympic record, world record, Olympic champion. As Riley climbed out of the pool, still processing what she had achieved, she looked up into the stands where she spotted a familiar figure. Martinez was standing and applauding, wearing the kind of expression Riley had learned to recognize, amazement mixed with vindication and pride. The coach who had once declared that Riley would never make it was now watching her athlete claim Olympic gold and rewrite swimming history. During the medal ceremony, as Riley stood on the top step of the podium listening to the national anthem, she reflected on the improbable journey that had brought her to this moment. From family tragedy to community pool lessons to elite training to Olympic gold, each step had seemed impossible until it became inevitable. But perhaps the most important realization was that this wasn't an ending, it was another beginning. Riley had learned that human potential was far more expandable than most people imagined, that limitations were often assumptions rather than realities, and that the most dangerous thing you could tell someone with true determination was that they'd never make it. Because sometimes, just sometimes, they'll spend the rest of their life proving that impossible is just another word for unexplored. The records Riley set that day still stand, but more importantly, her journey continues to inspire swimmers who are told they don't have what it takes, athletes who start too late, and anyone who has ever been underestimated based on their beginnings rather than their potential. Riley Chen's story proves that sometimes the most extraordinary achievements begin with the simplest decision, refusing to accept that you'll never make it. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.